Now that we have our basic setup complete, we're going to look at creating the assets for our project. So we can start off in our project pane, and inside of this project panel, what we can do is we can create assets in a number of different ways. Unity allows you different approaches to getting to basically the same thing. In development, though, the one thing that you want to do is try to remove as many clicks from your process as you can. When you are sitting at a computer for 8 to 16 hours a day, you want to make sure that you can get your process as streamlined as possible so it's as few clicks as possible. With Unity, you've got, of course, 3 different ways you could create an asset. We can go from our asset menu at the top to our create, and then to any number of our assets here. We can also right-click inside of the project panel and go to our create option and create an asset from here. Or our best approach, the simplest approach that's built in, is our create menu here on the project tab. We can click on that one and then click on the asset that we want. So again, it's all about streamlining that production. How quickly can I create that asset? We can even create an editor script where we could tie it to a hotkey and create the materials or the scripts just simply by pressing a shortcut key on the keyboard. Now, when we start to define what items are we going to create, we can start it anywhere. We can start at materials, scripts, or the actual models. Generally, I like to start with some of the models first, get some of those pieces in there, and then start adding to those models. So let's look at what we're actually going to be making. If we go over here and we take a peek at it, we've got the mock-up assets. So we've got basically a ship, an asteroid, a bullet, a shield, blocks, and an explosion. So let's start off with just our basic 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 objects right here. We're going to start off in our hierarchy tab. And in our hierarchy, similar to with our project tab, we can use our create option here to get to our basic primitive objects. So we're going to go in and we're going to create just a cube. And the cube's transform position, we're at 0. I'm going to hit F on the keyboard just to zoom in to the object. And we can see we've got our basic object in the scene. Let's go ahead and just rename this guy. We're going to call this one our player. And let's make an asteroid. So we're going to go back into our create. We're going to go to, let's say, a sphere. The sphere is going to look sort of like our asteroid. And we'll hit F2 on the keyboard, and we'll call this our asteroid. And let's create another object. We're going to create a bullet. So we're going to go back in. We'll make another sphere. And we'll call this our bullet. We could call this our projectile, or whatever it is that you might want to call it. These are just names that we use to identify these objects. So we've got a bullet, we've got our player, and our asteroid. Let's create one more cube, and this cube is going to be just a blocking cube. We can use for some level design elements. And let's take a peek at our project description one more time. You can see we've got this checked off, checked off, checked off, and the block checked off. These two, the shield, this is more an effect that we're going to create a little bit later, and then as well as with the explosion. So let's just start off with our basic assets. And with these basic assets, we can see we've got them named. They're all centered. They could really be anywhere you want, but we're going to keep them centered inside of the world. And let's go back in, and let's start to define these a little bit more. If we look over here, let's say we'll start with the player. The player, we have no material assigned to the player, so we're going to want to assign a material to this player object so that we can change our color up. Now, how do we assign a color to it? We need to create a material. So we're going to go to our project and create. We're going to create a material. And inside of here, we now have a material, says new material. We're just going to go in, and we'll call this one, let's say, a MAT player. Now, why do we call it MAT? It's just simply for organization. We can organize things a little bit easier. And let's go ahead and create some additional materials. We're creating materials. Let's just make all the materials that we need. We're going to make a material for our asteroid. We'll make a material for our bullet. And let's make a material for our block. And one thing to keep in mind is that if you just simply left click off of something as you're naming it, it resets the name back to the original. So you want to make sure that you're actually pressing on the Enter button or the return key so that it holds that name. So here we have materials set up for all of our assets. And let's do another one. We've got materials, we've got our objects. Let's go back in and create some JavaScripts. So we're going to go back into our project and our assets. We're going to create JavaScripts. And we're going to go ahead and call this a script player. Now, why do we call it script? It can be called whatever we want to call it. We're calling it a script simply because this is new to a lot of us. So naming it what it actually is a way just to help re-emphasize what it is that we're doing with these files. These are script files, and these are for each one of these assets. So we've got a script file for the asteroid, a script file for the player, a script file for our block, and a script file for our bullet. And what else do we need for this? We have materials for the objects, we've got scripts for the objects. If we look back into our create and our asset list, we can see that we've got materials. We don't really need any physics materials or GUI skins or shaders or anything extra like that. So we actually have most of what we need, except we do see this one right here. We see the prefab. So let's go ahead and create a prefab for each one of these objects so that we can store them inside of the prefab and use them as basically a reference object. And with this one, we'll call this one our prefab asteroid. And we'll do another prefab player. And we'll make a prefab block. And a prefab bullet. So this way we have all of our files nice and neatly organized. We can get to them nice and simple like without actually having to go in and create a folder structure at this point. We're actually able to just to find the things we want. The project is small enough that we don't have to break things into folders. So we've got our materials, we've got our prefab, we've got our scripts. We still need some additional assets built like a particle effect and then our shield effect that we're going to create. But let's build what we've got. We've got parts and pieces. Let's put some of them together. So we're going to look at our player here. And with our player, we can drag in. We're just going to take our player material, left click and drag across. We can drop it into the inspector. We could drop it onto the scene object inside of a scene or onto the hierarchy here. Now, the quickest, of course, would be just to drop it here. Makes it nice and simple because it's the closest to us. You can see that it gets added to our object inside of the inspector. Now it is set to white, so let's go ahead and change that color up a little bit. Let's make this a heroic color of some kind. We'll say red. Now do we see the red? Just remember that we've got two objects. We have a block inside of the scene, and they're just overlapping. So you're seeing one as opposed to the other. So with our player object, we've got the red on it. Now let's also drag on and assign our script file to the player. So now we have our script file and our material, and that object is basically set up and ready for us to use. The thing that we don't have yet, and we're going to look at a bit later, is tagging this object with a certain tag name. Now with that object ready, we're going to take this object from the hierarchy. We're going to drag this player object into our prefab object, our player prefab right here, and we're going to set it in there. And when we set it in there, you'll notice that our icon changes from the white to the blue. It lets us know that we've established and created a prefab object. And the name inside of the hierarchy also changes to blue to let you know that this is a prefab object. And by prefab, it simply means that we're able to make changes to one object, and those changes are propagated out through all the other objects that are a prefab. It makes it nice and simple for editing mass sets of objects, or when we're instantiating and working with objects in that way. Okay, so we've got our player prefab done, and we're going to do that same process for each one of these other objects inside of our scene. So let's just select on, let's say, our bullet. And then we're going to just drag, and we'll do a different process this time. We'll drag it all the way over and drop it. And our bullet script. And we'll drag that one over. So we've got that one set up. Let's change out our color a little bit. Maybe we'll go for like a yellow kind of color. And the scale of the object is a little bit on the large side. If we were going to shoot that out, that looks like a giant cannon. So let's actually tone that down just a little bit. Let's say we take that to maybe a 0.25. There we go. That's a little more believable. And we're just going to set this back to our 0 position, and we can drag our bullet back over to our prefab bullet. So we create our prefab with it. You see that we changed to the blue, so we've got our prefab. And our next object in our list, we've got our block. So let's look at our block, and this time we'll take different approach with our block. We'll just drag and drop inside of the inspector. Now we could try it. We'll see if we can get it. We notice that nothing happened. It's because we have overlapping objects, and sometimes when they're really close to each other, it doesn't quite know which one it's going to be going for. So we'll Control Z on that one because we probably applied it to the player in that example. So let's go ahead and try the material, but this time we'll go ahead and drag it back into our inspector. There we go. And this time it's showing the player now. And we can actually just select on the player. We'll make it nice and simple. We'll just hide our player for right now. Select back on our bullet. We'll hide this guy as well. And we'll go to our block. Now we're going to change our color up. What color do we want this time? For our block, this is like an asteroid floating in space, maybe sort of a brown, gray, or a cooler color. There we go. So we've got our material on there. Let's also drag our script onto our block. There we go. And then let's drag our block onto our prefab. And that last little one we're going to work on is just the asteroid right there. So let's select on our asteroid. Let's grab our material. Again, you can see that I'm just switching up between where you can go from. And I would suggest early on when you're starting off, drag different ways. You know, take it from the project to the hierarchy, from the project to the scene, or to the inspector, so that you get comfortable with the different ways you can approach this. And then in those experiments, you're going to find what's the way that you enjoy the most, what works the best for you. And for us, we've got our asteroid material applied, and let's take a peek at what our asteroid looks like. And we'll go ahead and drag over our asteroid script. Let's change our color up, and our color can be whatever it is we want it to be. Maybe more of a cool dark gray. There we go. And let's take our asteroid. Let's make a prefab with it. Alright, so as we look at it, we have our bullets, we have our blocks, we've got everything that we need for the main assets. We still need an explosion, a particle effect, and we'll look at that one in just a minute.